Webcam microphone up close. Webcam microphone up close.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was a...
But I have the files. I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible to bring? Pistols and fondle slab of choice, I don't know that the internet, professional wrestlers, and not Jesse Ventura style. It doesn't matter whether it's cartoon or as long as it's real. It's hard to get real information. Because seriously, they don't want you to just read these two sources whenever I try to prove out. It's not. If you expect your government to tell you the truth, you're going to be sadly disappointed on another one of these things.
Dear Lord, what a dirty, dirty old man.
Nah. Really? You can't be serious. Is this really how you want things to be? Come on. More hooker, eruptions. Eruptions, whatever.
Like Dave Powers kind of...
Really?
Allegedly broadcast live from Pima Region 2. Within the borders of the formerly united and currently occupied states of America, we bring you the Ochelli Effect.
It's like, damn sure, no, I'm an original. We have all these situations. I'd love to know why it takes 50 years, for...
That's that.
For a 19-year-old girl to eventually get up to gumption to put these things out.
And we are live on a Thursday. The Ochelli Effect, once again. What a day, what a day. Anyhow, I have an interesting guest coming up very shortly. Let's just see how that goes. It has been an experience. And I gotta say that, it's always interesting when people don't exactly hold up to their promises. They don't exactly hold up to their word, and it just costs you and costs you and costs you. And you know what the real fault is fools like me who seem to trust people. But that's got nothing to do with my guest tonight. Let's see if I can get a hold of her. Well, maybe not at the moment, but we will have her soon. See, I've got to do that at least 3 times during a program. I have to trip over my own tongue. I don't know what it is. It's become a tradition ever since I did this the first day. And I'm not just talking the Tuesday and Thursday. I mean, since I started with the Saturday, it seems like I just always have to trip over my own tongue. And I'll tell you, I might wind up just having to give you guys a history lesson if I don't gain the people that I need to gain very soon here. That was an interesting noise. I wonder if that showed up on the mic. Anyway, let's see. Well, still not sure what's going on with that. All right. Hello.
Hello.
Oh, there you are. Okay. I was having a little trouble getting you there.
Oh.
I was kind of filling time and I couldn't get you for some reason. I don't know. The Skype is totally not cooperating with me. First of all, it's changed to German or Russian or something. I don't know. And, it keeps doing all kinds of other screwy things to me today. So I don't know what the problem is. But, anyway, now we can get on with what it was I really wanted to talk about tonight. But you know what? If we get toward the end and I have time, I'm definitely going to wind up ranting on what I was talking about before, guys. So, here's the deal. I have plenty of things that go on my Facebook feed, and, it's pretty active. It's pretty interesting. And, the only thing that gives me more notices than my Black Sabbath fans thing, where people just spew all kinds of nonsense. And I gotta cancel that, by the way. But anyway, besides the Black Sabbath fans feed, this individual who I have on tonight always seems to be posting something somewhere and is just entirely prolific. I mean, to the point where it actually intimidates me, because as much as I like to talk, it seems like she likes to write. So, how about if you introduce yourself, since my whole intro was kind of busted there? And we'll just go from there.
I'm Suzanne Posel, the chief editor of OccupyCorporatism.com and my news agency. I'm the chief editor. I get to sit in that seat too. The USIndependent.com. Lots of wonderful people, experts, medical doctors, attorneys, broadcasters, commentators, reporters. We have a really wonderful group of people who are contributing, lots of guest contributors as well every single day. So check it out.
Right. And, I just bring up the whole Facebook thing as just one aspect of what happens. I mean, I actually started talking to this lady, by the way, guys, because essentially what happened was I was sourcing a bunch of different, see, there I go. That's my second trip over my tongue tonight, guys. Okay. I was sourcing this lady's work all the time, following up stories. They kept coming up, and I said, when I see the same name reoccurring, I got to have a conversation with that person. And that's my attitude with everything, and that's usually how I either get myself in trouble or make a friend or something. So that is exactly why I contacted you. I think you remember that, right, when I had that conversation with you?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. So, but the thing is, it's just so immense, the volume of stuff and the interesting stuff that is definitely in the vein of exactly what it is that I talk about and, exactly the kind of stuff that I'm reading constantly. Not to mention the fact that, really the concept of Occupy corporatism to me is just sort of a multi-dimensional term that could mean a whole lot of things. So I'm curious just right off the bat, what exactly, makes that the moniker for that site and everything. Do you know how that name was selected? Or
Yeah, I chose it because everything is corporatized. Everything is a corporation, including you. So since everything is incorporated, and that is the crux of most of the problems, then we need to occupy corporatism. It's just the appropriate term. We need to occupy it and either change the way it works or get rid of it and start over from scratch.
So it might as well be called Occupy Everything, huh? Because everything seems to be corporatized, everything seems to be incorporated in some way or other, and it's not really working for us anymore because, we're supposed to be individual creatures. We may act as collective individuals in some particular purposes or for particular purposes, I should say, in some particular fashions. But the thing is that we always have a need to be individuals, and it seems as though individualism is being washed away by the corporate entities. And it's strange because a lot of times, in the sort of ridiculous puppet show of the left-right paradigm, it seems like often they really support in one way or another the concept of a corporation being an entity unto itself and being amorphous outside of people. And then they always say back to me when I complain about the operations and the inhuman ways that the corporations seem to behave, they always try and come back at me with the idea of, well, the corporations are people. And I say, yeah, but the organization, the way that stuff is done is just exactly the kind of thing that is so counterintuitive to the idea of being free-thinking individuals that is the problem in and of itself. So that's great. It might as well be called Occupy Everything because everything is part of some corporation somewhere at this point. It's sort of like the contamination levels of everything in the world. But you know what? To give people an idea, just in case, and I'm sure they run across your stuff everywhere, but just to give people an idea, the recent headlines and things that you've been putting out there, I mean, what would be, say, I don't know, randomly a top 5, you think, of some of the headlines you put out recently?
Oh, well, one of them that's sitting up there today is warning FCC to allow tech corps to run the internet. And, we're all still talking about SOPA and PIPA and even ACTA. But what I've been following is an allowance of the corporations and your internet service providers to decide what is appropriate content on the internet and what isn't. And that is censorship of the internet. And that's happening right now. It's been happening for a long time. So while we're sitting here worrying about some bill that's going to be passed on Capitol Hill, the government has given the corporations free rein to control content all over the internet. And the amazing thing is, like with Google algorithms, there is an actual internet, and then there's the internet that you see. And you've never seen the actual internet. I've never seen the actual internet. No one has. Because that internet that you see is tailor-made for you. And you'll never see the actual internet. There's information you'll never get to. Just because you haven't put a keyword search in, you haven't clicked on something somewhere on social media, just because they assume that it's not in your sphere of influence or possible influence, they keep it from you.
So what you're saying is that it's being like customized as it's going. Where I've heard about this kind of stuff. I mean, there's the targeted advertising, and there's the there's the concept, of course, that Google autofills things, and not just in search engines, but in every aspect. Whenever you do anything, it suggests and steers your browser toward the things that relate to your past history. And if you want to try this, if you get on somebody else's computer who has a totally different set of interests from you, you'll find that when you go to try and go to your particular interests, unless you know exactly the website, it's difficult to get to. And the private companies I know have edited in a way content over time by sort of disallowing access through their networks. I mean, it's kind of hard to wrap my mind around. So let's just think about this for a sec. When you say that I've never seen the true internet and you've never seen the true internet, I mean, outside of the fact that it's a network of computers, like the way it was first explained to me in the 90s, let's just say, is that it's sort of just a sort of interconnected network of many, many computers, and that's all it is. And but the content and the ability to see what's on the net and all that is something that you get through a particular set of code, and that's that. Now, how is it that I'm not able to see the rest of it besides the fact that they sort of steer my browser and steer my interests and things like that?
Well, Kevin Slavin did a TED conference about 2010 where he explained how this all works. And it's about 14 minutes long. You can search it, how algorithms shape our world. Put that in a search engine and you'll be able to watch it. And he will explain to you what I'm attempting to explain. He's much more eloquent than I am. That the way that everything has been set up through these algorithms, that there is a general internet out there somewhere. And you have places that you go, places that you regulate, go to on a daily basis, or at least once a month, or on a semi-regular basis. And you have personal interests, and they change over time, but they change in spurts and in increments. And so you'll spend a lot of time looking at one particular issue or aspects of that particular issue, and then move on to something else. So the algorithms are taking your interests and applying products to it, applying broadcasts to it, pictures. When you do a picture search, that's also edited. So all of the information that's available to us is not available to us. In fact, it hasn't been available to us in a very long time. So
the reduction, in other words, like the reduction of what is available is more based on your previous activity than say the true availability of what is, in other words, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, look, if I turn on Facebook right now and I happen to have been on a totally different website looking at boots, let's just say, I guarantee you that the second that I open up my little page on Facebook, there'll be an ad sitting there for boots, and probably if I go to look at something and it's a different term on Facebook, I say the word camp, it'll say boot camp, something like that. That's the kind of guided weird stuff that does happen all the time. And it's not just in the Google engines, is it?
No, Bing does it. All of the major search engines do it. In fact, some of the quasi search engines that depend on the major search engines for their information are subject to that as well. In Facebook, they have this weird algorithm that they've just put in that the people who like your posts and comment on your posts are the people who show up in your newsfeed. And the people who don't slowly get edited out of your newsfeed.
So even your friends disappear from your newsfeed because they're just not part of the stream that the rest of your posts are?
Absolutely.
Huh.
Absolutely.
That's pretty weird right there, because it used to be, I mean, unless I'm wrong, I mean, I'm so bad at some of this stuff, I have a hard time understanding it. So I'm sorry if I'm dragging you down to the ABCs on it. But I like to do this because if anybody missed any of this stuff, it's always great to give them like the 101 again, But, just from looking at it, I did notice that, not only have they, reduced the amounts of posts and things from certain people in my feed, but they've also added, other advertising that seems to come out of nowhere, but usually has something to do with something I've been interested in recently. And, that is a strange algorithm. Does that guide anything else other than the news feeds, like say on Facebook, that particular algorithm, or is it just about the news feeds?
To my knowledge, it's just about the news feeds, but let me take you to YouTube. YouTube has super mods, super moderators. You can sign up to be one. In fact, some people, there's a couple of people in alternative media who happen to be super mods. I won't mention any names. And what super moderators are able to do is have content taken down.
See, now that's really, really scary to me because, this is why I absolutely don't have anything to do with Wikipedia at this point, because this was the type of program that they had in place, I would say, I don't know, at least 5 years ago, I know I read about it, if not more, where they had these sort of secret moderators that could, even though Wikipedia was supposed to be the thing that we could all edit and we could all sort of agree on and all that, and it was to become sort of this collective encyclopedia. And what we found out later was that there were sort of selected editors who were super moderators, and it was human super moderators. But now I guess the scarier thing is that we have automated ones too. But even so, Wikipedia is so extremely, censored. I'll give you a brief little thing about that. I'm very interested in the JFK assassination, right? So, but if you attempt to go on to the Wikipedia page and you try to make entries, let's just say for Lee Harvey Oswald, and you try to write anything that basically says anything other than he's pretty much the lone assassin, and there are people that deny that, they're conspiracy theorists, but generally speaking, this is the correct storyline. If you try and add any information, regardless of what sort of peer-reviewed sources you have, regardless of what academic studies you have about particular evidence, even the bullet lead analysis, which was completely destroyed by statistical analysis in the early 2000s, even that was not allowed on Wikipedia, even though it was a scientifically peer-reviewed study and published in more than one academic journal. They would not allow it up there. You could put it in, but they would take it out because the moderators were not on with the agenda of anything other than Oswald being a lone assassin. I know that was a little bit of a long story, but you're telling me that the same thing happens on YouTube?
Yes, absolutely. And that's unfortunate because there's always an official story, folks. There's an official story going on right now in alternative independent media, which is not factually based. And what bothers me is that if we're going to make good decisions, and I've said this probably on your program, I've said this on almost every program I've ever been on, we have to have good sourced evidentiary information. Otherwise, we're basing our decisions and our opinions on conjecture. And we could be wrong.
And besides that, I mean, what actually would we accomplish if all we did was sit there and bark at each other and make accusations and fling statements back and forth that were unsupported by anything? I mean, look, I could basically say that you're a werewolf and that you howl at the moon. Now disprove it. What kind of good would that do anybody? And, if there was, thousands of us doing that, I mean, again, what good does it do if we're going to try and sort of combat the mainstream puppet show if all we're doing is putting on, a low budget version of our own?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why I started the U.S. Independent, because, and I'm not the only one. Dane Wigington stands with me, Thomas Sheridan, Charlotte Iserby, Dr. Rima Libo, and, many, 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 many others. I'm sorry, I can't remember all their names, but, there has to be a standard. If we're going to replace the mainstream, well, the mainstream lies and they use opinions as if they were facts. Okay, well, then we need to take the model that was intended to be journalism and actually apply it. Mm-hmm. And it's not that it's not that hard. It's actually quite easy. You look at a situation, you look to see what you can prove, and you report on what's provable. Because that information, then the audience can take, the readers and the listeners can take and change their world. They can write to their congressman. They can go to their city council meeting. They can even protest for the correct things. The correct things can be done to correct the wrongs that have been made.
Or make validly educated decisions about, the food they eat and the places they go and the products they buy. Yes. Even the individuals that they intend to do business with, things like that. And this is for sure. If you are editing literally the stream of information, and we're talking about the internet in general, it's supposed to be pretty much a free stream of information where, and I mean free not in that it's financially free, but free as in there's plenty of bad things that go out there. There's plenty of good things that go out there. But it's like unfettered. It's not supposed to be agenda driven. You should be able to plant your own flag essentially on the internet and produce your information. And if your information is picked up by lots of people, then it's like free market for real, as far as information goes, right?
Absolutely. So we need to click on the source links. I provide source links. I always have since day one, because I want people to see what I saw when I was doing the research. And I try to find as many actual documents referred to in the article as possible. I don't want to just, quote the article where I found the lead to the information that I later read. I want you to read the actual document. If we don't click on the source links, and if we, for the love of God, people, stop commenting on headlines. Headlines are not encompassing. Headlines are designed to get you to read the article. But if you comment on the headline, you're not commenting on the actual information contained in the article. And it gets to be redundant in comment threads because it takes away from the actual conversation about the information that was contained in the article.
Yeah, the pretty package around the food doesn't necessarily reflect what's ugly inside sometimes. That's
Absolutely.
Kind of the way it is, yeah.
And a way to prove that what I'm saying is true is 2 weeks ago in Manhattan, parents removed their children from taking the Common Core assessment test. 70% of the student body did not take that test. Why? Because the parents know what Common Core actually is, and they made an informed decision for the rights of their children, and they are the only advocate for their children. And that is an example of what good sourced evidentiary information can do.
And just by the way, where did you get that particular piece? I mean, I don't know if you remember right off the top of your head, but where did you find that piece of information?
I wrote an article recently about Common Core. This was the end of last week, and I was really amazed. Later on, last week, or earlier this week, I wrote an article about InBloom. InBloom is the data mining corporation that was going to be monitoring all of the students in about 7 different states had signed on, and they were beta testing it in New York. Well, InBloom has closed their doors. They were funded by the Bill Gates Foundation and Carnegie. So they will not be doing what they were doing. And what they were doing was taking information on the student, including their test scores, including all commentary, their entire school record, and giving it over to Scholastic, giving it over to McGraw-Hill, and saying, here, rewrite the textbooks because apparently these kids in 5th grade don't get it. There's too much of a learning curve. This is a perfect way to dumb down the information. And they justified that by saying that the information had to be tailored to the needs of the student. No, the student needs to rise above themselves and show self-esteem and show their own self-respect and learn the information and become better versions of themselves. They're not going to do that if you keep lowering the standard of information that you hand to them.
That's the old lowering the bar adage. If you keep lowering the bar, then they'll stop trying to jump so high, I guess. And but you know, we just kind of picked on two stories real quick, and I know we're not really doing justice to most of them, but I mean, I just want to give a sort of all around view of some of the other stuff that you've been on too. You know, off the top of your head, what else has come out as well?
The investor for Greenlight Capital. And this gentleman, I have trouble pronouncing his last name, David Einhorn. I hope I'm saying it right. He owns a hedge fund, and he became famous because he started betting against Lehman Brothers right before they took a huge nosedive. And he actually predicted their collapse, which is why he started betting against them on the stock market. And he has come out and said that technology stocks are exploding because they are a bubble, and the bubble is about to burst. So his firm has sent out a quarterly report to their clients saying, quote, "There is a clear consensus that we are witnessing our second tech bubble in 15 years. The first one was the dot-com bubble. What is uncertain is how much further the bubble can expand and what will make it pop." So here we have Wall Street doing it again with all of these tech corporations creating a bubble, moving wealth, moving money into the hands of the wealthy. And then as soon as it explodes, you'll see all of these new startups that have tried to make it through just completely collapse. And then what will be left is a consortium of a monopoly between Google, Facebook, and all these other major tech corporations who will be left to pick up the pieces while these others, mom and pop startups, just implode.
Right. I mean, it seems like everything on Wall Street is just a giant game of musical chairs, but the problem is that there are certain people that just own a lot of the chairs. You know, your random individual that goes in there might have themselves one chair in that game, but you know, if you're Google, you probably got about 5,000. So you know, if two of them go away every time the music stops, you're okay because you got 498 more chairs to sit on. That's what it seems like.
Absolutely. And I was about to post this article and I was putting it in the backside of the website, and something told me to go look up this information again. So late last night I caught the managing director of IJM Institutional Services, who is a contributor to CNBC, and Jeff Kilberg, who is the founder and CEO of KKM Financial and also a contributor to CNBC, talking about how this isn't a bubble. You got to invest all your money in tech. You got to get all your money in those stocks. Don't worry about this. This guy who predicted the Lehman Brothers collapse, he doesn't know what he's talking about.
So we have these guys basically trying to draw the suckers in, and they were saying this stuff. Where were they saying it though? Because they weren't saying it on CNBC, right?
Oh yes, on
they
two
were.
CNBC articles. Yeah, I thought it was funny that they got their own guys to come out, and you know, because they're not biased, right?
Well, of course not.
So they get their own guys to come and say that this investor is just ridiculous. And they mentioned the fact that it is the mom and pop investor level that will be affected by this. Absolutely. Because if you want to get rid of your competition, if you want to make sure that your competition is not able to thrive in a free capitalist market, then you create a bubble with stocks, and then you implode all of those smaller businesses, and then all you have are the large major tech corporations.
Well, yeah, and as with even the oil companies did this already. This has been an ongoing pattern. I mean, even before tech stocks were even a thing, pretty much. The commodities market has kind of played the same way, where they do this too, huh? Seems like they just changed the names, but it's the same old script.
Absolutely. Well, it's not broken, so they're not going to fix it. It works every time, so they're going to keep doing it. We have to stop complying with them so that they have to change their game. If they have to change their game, it gives us a little window of opportunity We're looking for that small window of opportunity where we can pounce. If we stop complying, they'll have to go back to the drawing board. That's our opportunity. We can't force an opportunity to pounce because it's not going to work out in our favor.
Well, yeah, but you know what the problem is, as far as like a lot of these mom and pop investors, as you're saying, or, you know, the lower level guys, the guys who don't have, you know, the big firms that are handling this stuff is, you know, in a lot of cases, it's people's inability to let go of their gambler's hand, where it's like, you know, listen, I know everybody else gets beat. I know the system is rigged, but I think I have a way to beat it, and I'm gonna scratch off the right ticket. I'm gonna hit the right lottery ticket. You know, I'm gonna go to the right slot machine and pull the switch one time. And it just seems to me like it's almost like, just playing on that particular wanting to make it, wanting to be one of the big boys without the understanding that there's no way to ever actually ascend, into that stratosphere without the approval of the others that are already up there anyway, right?
Yeah, it's the story of the boy who cried wolf. He wanted attention, so he kept crying wolf. What ended up happening was the wolf came into the town square, took his little brother, and ran off into the woods, and he had to go rescue his little brother himself. So if we want to avoid all of that drama, then we can't sit there and act like we're not making emotional decisions, that we're not feeding into our addictions. We are. Okay, so we get it. We're addicted and we're emotional. That's wonderful. That's a good place to start because that means we can start to change it. We don't have to react every single time we get information. We don't have to give into our addiction every single time our brain tells us that we want something that we don't actually want. So we can learn to change our behavior. The wonderful thing about our brain is it's malleable. We are not set in stone. So the connections that we have in our brain can be rewired, and we can be the ones to rewire it. And it only takes a moment of consciousness. We talk about waking up and being a sheep and being unconscious. Consciousness is recognizing a situation, evaluating your emotional response to it, and then acting on logic and not your emotional response. That's consciousness. We need to start doing that. Every single time we start to emotionally react, we need to stop and take 2 steps back and say, whoa, okay, what is actually the issue here? And why does someone want me to emotionally react? And why are they directing me to emotionally react in this specific way? What would be the agenda behind me getting upset in this specific way?
Discipline over outburst, basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As a collective, I know it's prevalent in the United States, but it could be a global phenomenon. We have low self-esteem. We want to be popular, but we don't want to do the work it takes to be recognized for the things that are worth being recognized for. So we have low self-esteem, so we're willing to buy our way into it. That's what the stock market is about. That's what you were talking about. I want to make a quick buck. That's why people buy lottery tickets. They don't want to do the work it takes. People say to me all the time, how do you write 4 to 5 articles a day, 6 days a week? How can I not? I love what I do.
You know, that was actually my very next question for you when I was going to step away from what we were talking about on the stock market is how is it that you actually, because the volume of stuff, I know I was being a little ridiculous about the social media thing, but I'm telling you, you're out there all the time, and there is such a huge volume. It's like you're a writing machine. I guess it is that you actually enjoy the act of it, because I mean, I would swear that there's 3 of you, you know.
There's lots of theories out there. There are theories that there's a whole consortium of people who write under my name. There's even theories that my name is really an acronym for something else. This was put out there by a professor who actually teaches college actively right now. That's kind of sick.
Wow.
But I love what I do. When I look in the news, I'm going for what I feel is the most important issue in front of me right now.
Well, I'll tell you this: if you're just a program or if you're just a machine, I'm very impressed because I've never seen one react and be able to actually have a conversation like this. So, you know, color me impressed then. But joking aside, I mean, it's just it is what you enjoy doing. I mean, you know, a lot of people think that it's very easy to sit and talk and to and to make, and to fill airtime, let's just say, speaking about anything intelligently and outside of just babbling randomly. It's not. But the thing is, I really love to do it. That's why I'm doing this. And that's why I did many things in my life, is because I enjoyed them so much. And it does add to the volume of it and the quality of it when you enjoy it. And that's the odd sort of thing that's really lacking, I'd say, when you're talking about this whole idea of self-esteem and how people don't want to put the work into it to get that level of success. To me, though, success is not really something that is quantified by the monetary gain. But I guess it's qualified by your own satisfaction, and I guess I should feel sad for people that need that lottery ticket fix, that need that casino fix all the time, because I guess that's probably one of the most insidious things, is that sort of addiction to the esteem in a way, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's what drives our social consciousness in this culture that we have in America. And it's all the way down to, think back to when you were in school. Who was popular? Who wasn't? How did you get treated if you were on either end of the stick? And it goes into when you start working and when you start showing people who you actually are. And if you don't know who you are, so what are you going to show them? Take the time to get to know yourself and find out what you like and what's important to you. And what's amazing is if you focus on what you enjoy and make that your goal, why not make that your job? Why not make that your reason for being? Take your weekend hobby and be brave enough to believe in yourself enough to turn that into something that could be lucrative.
Yeah, I can't argue with a single thing you just said right there. That's exactly what I'm trying to do now. So this is where we're at.
If we want to bring the middle class back to life, middle class is about innovation. They are the starters of the businesses. They are the job creators. So folks, let's get our self-esteem back. Let's look in the mirror and say, you know what? I'm not a bad person. What do you like to do? What do you like to do that you always say that you're going to do that you never do? Try doing it. Try seeing if there's a market for it. Make your own job. Make your own business. Bring the middle class back, and bring it back with such fervor and such a high level of self-esteem that it would not be acceptable on any level to be treated any differently than the sovereign citizens that we are.
Sort of like be inspirational instead of institutional,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I again can't argue with any of that, but it's just, but it is amazing the amount of stuff you put out. Even other people that I see out there that are doing similar sorts of work, let's just say, they don't produce the kind of volume you do. So I guess that is about your attitude on the subject, and that's, it seems pretty solid to me. So
this is important to me. I really want us to change this world. I don't think that it has to happen at the other end of a gun. I don't think that it has to be a violent uprising. I saw a wonderful picture on Facebook of a couple who turned their entire front yard into a huge garden with all different types of fruits and vegetables going on in there. And they said, this is revolution. Absolutely. It doesn't have to be done even in a way where you have to put yourself out there if you don't feel comfortable doing so. You can just choose to buy different products. You can just choose to invest your money in different things. Maybe invest in yourself. Maybe take a step, take a leap, find out what you really enjoy, find out what really makes you happy, and put that money that you have in savings into that and see where that takes you. If we keep making decisions that move us forward, even if they're bad decisions, look, success is 99% failure. So guess what? Every time you fail, you should rejoice, because that's one step closer you are to success. It's all about perspective. This is how fear porn works. Fear porn works because we have such a low self-esteem. If we weren't afraid, if we knew who we were and stood in that knowingness, in that awareness, then it would not be acceptable to be treated any less than for who we are and what we contribute. We would not accept abuse on any level, personally, professionally, from our governments, from any institution at all. And it wouldn't take a violent uprising. It would take a change of perspective, that we're not scared. And we don't have to prove that we're not scared by beefing ourselves up and grabbing a gun and going out there and showing people that we're not scared, because that's still hiding behind an apparatus. The people who come to the table with nothing but themselves are the ones who stand tall, because they're not hiding behind anything anymore.
That is rather profound, I gotta say. And it's just, it does lead right into that whole line of thinking that I keep hearing over and over again, that, essentially there are two emotions in the world, and, one is fear and the other is love. And when you act out of fear, negative things come. And when you act out of love, the positive comes. And, the fact is that talking about believing in yourself and going after the things that matter to you personally, and being yourself, being comfortable in your own skin, and making decisions that are going to affect the overall nature of your little patch of the world, I think are just exactly the greatest expressions of love for self and for any of those that you're going to touch, that you could encounter in a lifetime. So, it is, like I said, often repeated so many better ways than I'm capable of saying, that these two things are very, very much these sort of two sides of life's coin. And when you do act out of love, it's so much a better result, it seems to me.
Sure, we should be paying it forward. We should be giving forward. We should look at the waitress and say, yeah, okay, they weren't the best waitress, but you know what? They live off these tips. And the guy before me and the guy before that probably screwed them out of some money. So I'm going to give them a 20% tip just because. Just because. That's a person who has a family. You never know. When a couple of years ago, I had a friend who was battling with addiction, and she asked me to attend some of her meetings. And so I went with her. And I heard at one meeting one incredible story. This woman was given $10, and she went and bought some illegal drugs and ended up ODing. And she was in the hospital in a coma for 3 weeks. And when she woke up, after everything, a couple of weeks later, thinking about things, she realized that that person who had given her the $10 saved her life. And she has spent the rest of that time since that incident going around and speaking to people in Narcotics Anonymous all over the world, telling people her story. You never know if what you do for someone else unselfishly is going to affect change in their life. You can guarantee that at some level it's going to change them. But you never know if you're the reason why they become a better version of themselves. And if we're all doing that for each other, then there is no other outcome than a better world.
Sort of like I always do this where I draw these, metaphoric sort of reasons for why we should think positively about things, and why, because a lot of times, and I got to tell you, this happens to me a lot, where I talk to people for a while and they say, the things that you're saying make sense. And yeah, I see the negatives that you're pointing out, and I see that it's a huge thing, and I see that, it seems to be everywhere, whether we're talking again about the natural elements of this, or the social elements, or the media, or whatever. It's just so inundated on every level with all these negative things. They look at me and they say, well, there's no way that you making your little speech or you passing along one good idea is going to make a difference. And what I usually say to that is, listen, raindrops fall in the ocean, and each individual raindrop, eventually, when enough raindrops fall in the ocean, the tides do change. And you can't deny that even the rain against the mountains eventually changes them. So it's not a matter of the size of what you do necessarily, but the fact that you're contributing to the change is probably the best thing that you can do. Now, some people will be able to contribute to the change in a larger way. And if you get lucky, you can, fire that shot that's heard around the world, or make that noise that's heard around the world if you get lucky. But even if you don't, and even if it doesn't echo, say, on so many different levels that, that it's instantaneously understood as something that was profound and as something that was, omnipresent, say, in the consciousness, even for a time, it doesn't matter, because every single positive step forward, even if it's the smallest bit of a step, is all going in the right direction. And besides that, if we all started to go that way, and we all started to influence each other's minds collectively, I don't see how it could do anything but good.
That is exactly what I think. That's why I'm all about noncompliance. And I know it's not popular, especially right now, but the people who have decided what the outcome what the outcome will be, rather, are the people who are poking you in the chest. So if you know that the person who's poking you in the chest wants a fight with you, and you know that they're probably going to really beat you down, why fight? When I was in junior high, there was one girl who really didn't like me. And she wanted every single day at 3:00, she wanted me to show up and fight with her. And every day at 3:00, I got on my bus and went home and did my homework and talked to my friends and had a good time and went to bed. And after a week of this, she confronted me in the hallway in front of my locker. And everybody was there. And everybody stopped. And she said, "Why don't you show up?" And I said, "Because I have things to do. If you want to show up there and wait for me, that's fine. I don't want to participate in this with you. So if you're going to hit me, go ahead and hit me now. Because I'm not going to waste my time going to be at 3:00 when I could go home and do my homework and make a better life for myself." And she stood there. And everyone, you could have heard a pin drop. And that girl never said a word to me the whole time I was in junior high.
Probably very confused, because her whole concept of conflict resolution rested with aggression. And that is also an interesting point, is that when you're dealing with an entity, whether it be a large one or even an individual who knows nothing but aggression, when you hand them a completely sort of different a completely different landscape from which they have to deal with you. When you don't allow them to have that so easily, you don't engage the fight directly, it's definitely a game changer, and they often do move on to someone else that will engage them
Sure.
one way or another. And here's the thing, though: if nobody ever engages them, they sort of lose their power. That's part of the problem. I mean, I know that, and believe me, I grew up in some rougher schools and everything, so there was plenty of times there was no way that I was going to escape what was going to happen. And I'm not saying that I was always a peaceful kid. No, not at all. I didn't learn overnight to be peaceful, and definitely as a kid I was not. But the truth is, though, that I would have saved myself a whole lot of trouble had I simply taken the aggressor and engaged them in a different fashion outside of simply meeting them with aggression. And it is easier said than done, though, sometimes, because you're sort of surrounded in a way by aggression, in my opinion. In certain parts of this country and in other countries, there is sort of a high level of atmospheric stress among people that causes aggression to be the preferred sort of method to settle conflict, to deal with any sort of resolution of any sort of dispute whatsoever. And,
Absolutely. We know that they use divide and conquer. It's really a simple tool, and yet everyone falls for it. So they're going to keep doing it. If we don't like a certain corporation that sells widgets, then stop buying their widgets. They'll go out of business. It might take 6 months. I promise you, they'll go out of business.
Well, see, Yeah, I'm
Go ahead.
sorry. Well, one of the ones that I really hate, I got to tell you, and I know I'm going to get something out of you on this, but one of the corporations that I really can't stand, because on every single level I just don't see anything redeemable about them, is Walmart. Okay, and when I sit there and I discuss with people and I say, look, you tell me what would make it, what kind of a thing could be wrong with a company that would make you not want to do business with it. And eventually I'll find something that they will find morally reprehensible in one way or another. And realistically, Walmart is one of those companies where you can't even avoid a moral conundrum of some kind if you're going to do business with them on any level. So the deal is this. I say to them, well, okay, what is it that you would find, so repulsive, so repugnant, so just distasteful to your being that you would not want to do business with them? So they say to me something like, if people were dying, or if this was happening, or if that was happening, in order for me to be able to shop there or whatever. So I explain to them how this or that happens. Well, they pay people pretty good, people say to me. I say, you got to be kidding me, right? You don't know about the labor practices that they've been involved in. I mean, it's public, it's part of the public record that they're, completely unfair to their labor force. Stuff like that. Or they say to me, well, if so much of this stuff was made in China, because they're still stuck in that, China being the ultimate enemy in the false paradigm, the red baiting thing. Whatever it is, doesn't matter. But even when I present it to them and I give them their reason, right back to them, that this is why you should not shop at the Walmart, at least, because that's something you can do, is not shop at the Walmart. They often say to me, well, I got to go there because it's the cheapest way.
I hear that a lot. I really do. And I'm strapped for cash too. But we've made a conscious decision that we are going to support our local business. All local businesses. We make sure that the items that we purchase are of good quality. I know that there's planned obsolescence involved, but I want it to last as long as possible. And we make sure that we are supporting our friends and neighbors. Because if we keep our money local and we keep supporting our friends and neighbors, then they can keep their businesses open and they can keep hiring people. They can expand. They can hire more people. They could take the employees that are not working at the Walmart and funnel them into the local economy and work for the local businesses. There's going to be a period of uncomfortability. And I understand that, but that is the transition period. When you're in the transition period, you shouldn't look at it in a negative way. That's a good thing. When you are uncomfortable is when there is actual change happening, because you're out of your normal element and you are now in a place where you can make different decisions. And if you feel comfortable making those different decisions, you could change your life. So if we want things to keep going the way that they're going, we can keep making the same excuses that we're making, and nothing will ever change to our benefit. But if we want things to move to the tide where we're having success and we are able to bring back the middle class on our own, and we are able to, regardless of what they're doing with our purchasing power, making sure that we are able to get the things that we need, building up our communities, building up our social structures, then we will prosper, period. There's no other way it can be. So we have to make a decision that we're going to be uncomfortable for a little while, maybe a decade or two. I understand that. But in the end game for that is that we have our sovereignty back. We have our life back. We have the ability to pursue happiness again.
Right, and it's very visible too in the local communities when people do begin to resist these larger corporate flags being planted in their backyards, because what happens is, and I hear people complain all the time about, the blight that ends up happening in their little communities. Well, this used to be a good town and stuff like that. And in a lot of cases, what ends up destroying the town entirely is the introduction of these large corporate entities. And I sometimes can't get them to relate that. Like, how would you go about, explaining? Because even though I explained to them, look, if you support the local hardware store more than, anything else, The local hardware store will stay there. You'll know the people that are there. Your neighbors own it. Your neighbors work there. It just keeps things moving on a local level, which makes your surrounding community richer in general. If you support the Walmart store or you support the giant whatever entity, you're basically letting the money leave your community. And then what's going to happen eventually is everybody's broke and hopefully has a job at Walmart if they're lucky. And then after that, when everybody's completely broke, well, the Walmart will go away too.
Absolutely.
Because it just simply sucks the money and the life out of your local community. I mean, I have a hard time explaining that. I mean, how would you get across to somebody who doesn't quite get that even though, your batteries are cheaper over there and, maybe you can buy your groceries and your tires in the same spot, but what is it that you would say to somebody to get through to them when they don't see that really what they're doing is destroying their own backyards with that?
There's nothing you can do to make someone do something they are not ready or willing to do. Period. So are we going to destroy our relationships with our friends and family that we've known for years because our paradigm has shifted? That doesn't make any sense. It's not productive for the end game, which is to get our communities back. So what we have to do is be the change that we wish to see in the world. You do it. You invite your friends over and show them what a great meal that it wasn't bought at Walmart looks like. What great furniture inside a house that wasn't purchased at Walmart looks like. And tell them how much you spent for it. Talk about what you're doing and how you're helping things and ask them if they would be willing to go with you next time you go shopping. You'd be amazed. If they're going to use influence to get us to do things that don't benefit us, then why don't we just do it back? And get your friends and family to see that your life has been bettered by this information. Your life has been bettered by this change that you've made. Your health has been bettered because you're not eating GMO or you're not using aspartame anymore. We learn when we see a palatable change and we go to replicate it. So if we want our friends and family to know that 9/11 was an inside job, we're not going to get anywhere by beating them over the head. We've been told to wake up as many people as possible. That reminds me a lot about proselytizing. I remember in a Southern Baptist church that I attended for a couple of years, we would go out every weekend and hand out tracts and proselytize to people in the middle of this one area where they had like restaurants and a movie theater, and it was a very big place where a lot of people would attend on Friday and Saturday nights. Why are we proselytizing to each other? Well, you're not going to force someone to do something that they don't want to do. But if they see that what you're doing is benefiting you, they will go home and think about how what they're doing is not benefiting them. And I promise you, at some point, they're going to call you up or come over to your house and say, what are you doing differently? How come you're so happy? How come your family is so happy? How come your marriage is so wonderful? How come you have all of these nice things? What is going on with you that's different than what I'm doing? And that's when you can say, hey, look, I decided to make these changes. And if you want to, make these changes for yourself. Try it out for a week or two. See how you feel. I promise you they will. And that's how we move it forward. But we're not going to get anywhere beating each other over the head. We're dividing each other. You see, we're using the same tactic that they're using to divide us. We're dividing each other, and we have this problem in this country where we are isolated from each other, and we get depressed because of it. And we feel like no one understands us, and that is just the wrong way to look at it, because that's not true. Your parents who raised you, who know you better than you know yourself, they are always on your side, and they do love you. And they may not have been able to express it the way that you would like, and I understand that some of you came from an abused home, and I'm sorry for that. But we also can make other family members, outside members, who are our mother and our father figure, and those people love us and care about us. And if we gather that strength and build up our self-esteem and stand up and demand that we respect ourselves, we respect our bodies, we respect our minds, and we will not allow anything to contaminate us, whether it's in our food, on our drink, or on our television, or on our radio, or on our news feed in whatever social media you use, don't allow yourself to become contaminated anymore, because it's not working out for us. We know that they're doing all these egregious things, but nothing is changing to our benefit. It's getting worse. It's benefiting them. Why? Stop and think about that. The tactics that we're using are not effectual. They don't work. They serve some other agenda. So since it's not working out in our favor, let's open our minds and go back to the drawing board and find out what would work for our benefit, what would bring our middle class back, what would allow our communities to prosper. And do that instead of what we're doing now. And see if it changes. I promise you it will.
And that just, for me to sort of capsulize it, I would say that's just influence by example and improvement by results, because that is effectively what you're doing. And it's almost as though you're becoming a living representation of what it is, a lot of the sort of commercial corporatist, entities like to shove down our throats. Look at how happy somebody is, and look at how much success they have because they bought the right kind of beer, or they bought the right kind of deodorant, or they bought the right kind of this, so you can have what they have. It's the same tactic, except basically allowing people to learn the good things by example, by local and by direct connection, as opposed to that disconnected matrix of media that we have around us at the moment, huh?
Absolutely. We also have to stop feeding into the celebrity. We do not know these people, and we cannot imagine or assume that they have our particular best interests at heart, even though they say that they do, because actions speak louder than words. And everyone does physically. Your actions are what you're thinking. You do what you think about. You walk up to the refrigerator to go get something to eat. I'm going to assume that you're actually hungry. I'm probably right about that. You go to get into your car. I assume you want to go somewhere. I'm probably right about that. If we pay attention to what we're doing, and we stop looking up to people that we don't know personally, and stop taking what they say into our personal paradigm, and start realizing how much marketing and sales goes into everything that we see. Everything. I am not separating anyone from that. I'm lumping it all together. It's sales and marketing. So if they want you to buy a product or an idea or a way of life, you should ask yourself if that's right for you and why you would be attracted to it. We have this thing called arrested development. And what arrested development is, for those who don't know, it's at this emotional stage where you stopped growing. And so every time something happens that triggers that emotional state, you go back to that age, whether it was 2 years old, 10 years old, 20 years old, whatever it was. That one moment that changed your entire paradigm of life, that is the moment that you go back to every time you get scared, every time you get nervous, every time you think you can't do something, and you talk yourself out of it, and you go back to your miserable life, and you make do, and you say thank you for the little bit that you have, when you know that your potential is greater than that, and you waste your whole life knowing that there's something great inside you that you never let out because you were afraid of failure. And that is a life unlived. That is surviving. And that is exactly what the powers that be want us to do. They just want us to survive long enough to do what they want us to do. And if you get too old for that, they've got a place for you. Look at what's happening with the veterans. I just put out this article today. There's a waiting list, a secret waiting list at the VA in Phoenix. And they are actually allowing our veterans to die, not giving them the care that they need, not even letting them go to see their primary doctor for 2 to 6 weeks to even get a preliminary diagnosis.
What is causing that to happen? Because, I'm always confused by that stuff. I got to be honest with you, because I've known a lot of guys who've served, but I didn't myself. I was incapable of doing so. But the thing is, I always wondered exactly how that happens. I mean, I've read lots of stories and I've seen lots of news stories where they talk about backlogs because of the volume of individuals or the volume of injuries, whether they be psychological or otherwise, sort of creating a backlog because there's a lack of resources and all this other nonsense. And it kills me because, I mean, if we think about the amount of money that's being spent to conduct these wars in the first place and to utilize these people for these purposes, the amount of money that's being spent if we spent the proper amount of money to repair these gentlemen, or to assist them or to make them, have better lives in any way, shape, or form afterwards, it seems to me as though it would be much more cost effective than the damage to society that's caused by allowing this stuff to keep going as it is. But can you get into some of the specifics on this one? Because I didn't hear about the one in Phoenix yet. I don't think I read that article at all.
The whistleblower's name is Sam Foote. He's a former doctor with the Phoenix VA Health Systems, and he revealed, quote, a secret waiting list that was used by senior management to conceal the fact that 1,400 to 1,600 sick veterans were forced onto waiting lists as long as months to see a doctor. They used this scheme to deliberately avoid the VA's own internal rules. And what they had are two different books. The official list that they showed a waiting time of 14 to 30 days to cover their tracks, while they had the secret list where you couldn't even see your preliminary doctor for 2 to 6 weeks to even get the initial diagnosis.
So not only are we talking about a backlog, which already on the official books, but you're saying that there's an alternate list which is more realistic, that they had in hand, where they actually know that they're purposely delaying this. I mean, did this guy comment on exactly it seems to me, and this is my opinion, that is a purposeful way to just sort of delay so that some of these guys will give up in case their problems heal themselves, or they might die off, or they might just surrender and decide to live with their conditions. That's what it seems like to me. Does this guy say that that's what the purpose of it was, or?
The information is just coming out. This gentleman, he was quoted in the Wall Street Journal, I'm sorry. He said that a hard copy was placed into a secret electronic waiting list, and the paper data was shredded. He also revealed that patients wouldn't be taken off the secret list until their appointment time within 14 days or less, given the appearance that the VA was improving their waiting times, and that he felt sorry for the people who work at the Phoenix VA, and that they all wished that they could leave because they didn't, because they knew that they were doing something wrong.
Wow. And that's just in Phoenix we're talking about here.
That's just the Phoenix VA.
Well, I've heard about this in other places too. I mean, everywhere there's one of these hospitals, it seems like this is going on. I mean, did you make reference to any of that, like some other locations where this stuff has happened in that article?
No, I didn't in this article, but something that's a little bit off topic, but it seems kind of pertinent when you think about it. In, I think this was last year, they were doing patient dumping, where it was a facility in Nevada that was funded by the U.S. government. And this was a psychiatric hospital. So when the patient was not responding to treatment, they would give them a one-way bus ticket to anywhere in the country with 3 days worth of meds. And good luck to you. And some of them ended up in San Francisco. And this is where it all blew up, because officials in San Francisco were questioning why all of a sudden there was a high influx of people who had mental illnesses and were homeless. And one of them, who had just recently gotten off the bus, explained what had happened to him. And he was very, very scared, because he was institutionalized for most of his life, and he was not used to being outside, and he knew that he couldn't function, and he turned himself in. How many people haven't turned themselves in? How many people are suffering on the streets and they've been dumped because a facility says that they're untreatable, and they still get their money from the government. They're still running their business. They just have a better ratio rate as far as successes because they get rid of the failures.
Wow. And I've read some other stuff over the past couple of years where this stuff was happening in the private sector too, where they were just they were skewing the numbers by creating a temporary system so that they could have a revolving door and let them out. The people that were incurable or whatever, they would put them into group homes in some cases, but only, and I do say only, when the insurance would support it. So, I mean, does it seem like it's developing like a lack of insurance, resources for these guys? Or is it just like a willful sort of thing that seems to be going on within the VA itself?
What it appears to me is that they don't want to cut their funding. They want to make sure that their funding stays the way that it is, but they're not willing to do the work it takes to get that legitimately. So they're cooking their books. They're allowing people to die. The video at the end of the article is heart-wrenching. This one gentleman, his relative, I believe it was his daughter, was recalling when her father was standing in the kitchen screaming and crying, and she had never known her father to do this, saying, "Please don't let them kill me." Mm. And I've spoken with Dinah Everett Snyder, who is a presenter on Wide Awake News. And she's a really good friend of mine, and she has devoted a lot of her life to spending time with veterans and helping veterans. And she, unfortunately, spends a lot of time in hospice where their family members, their friends, their relatives, their significant others are no longer visiting them. And she is there with them even when they pass. And the thing that there's an interview I did with her on the U.S. Independent about the secret scars of veterans, because they confess even things that they couldn't tell their wives, and they feel bad that they had to live with these secrets that they held, why they were distant with their children, why they didn't tell their son that they loved him enough or hugged them enough, and they couldn't at the time, but now that they're lying on their deathbed, they realize how ridiculously stupid it was, and they wish they could take it back, and they can't. And those people aren't even coming to visit them anymore, because of all the anger and frustration over the years of not connecting emotionally with the people that we love the most. And so they tell her these stories, and the interview is just heart-wrenching. And this is not an uncommon occurrence. So why, this seems to be a prevalence, and I'm 36, so I can only go back to like the Vietnam War, remembering how the veterans were treated when they came back. And my father, tells me stories about when he was stationed. He was in the Air Force when he was stationed in Haight-Ashbury, and he had to wear a long wig, and different types of clothing, because if they went out in their uniform with their haircut, they were beaten. There's a misunderstanding that just because the people who started the wars are wrong, the people who go to fight them are good, wonderful, honest people. And they send their sons and their husbands and their brothers to die for us. And I know that it's a banker's war, but we can't punish these people who were willing to die for us, even if it was for the wrong reasons. They were willing to die so that we can live. We need to treat these people with the utmost care and respect. These people should be venerated. These are some of the most wonderful people on the planet, because they're willing to put themselves in front of a line of fire to make sure that you can grow up and your children can grow up and you can have a successful life, and so can your children.
Yeah, see, I've always tried to make that statement as well, because my father, I'm a little older than you, but my father also served over there and was not properly treated when he returned. And to be honest with you, at the end of the day, he committed suicide, and that was just sort of an acceptable loss. There wasn't follow-up. There wasn't care given to these guys. I don't even think until much later they started to accept the concept of post-traumatic stress disorder, even as an illness. I believe for the longest time in the VA system for sure, and there were guys, and it doesn't start with Vietnam for sure, regardless of my own personal feelings on it. I know that there were guys before that were ignored and allowed to sort of wither and die after they were done doing their jobs. And that is one of the things that always hurts me when people say that that these guys who went over there to do these things had all of these foul sort of motives. They didn't necessarily have that. And I get into arguments with people sometimes because I do, it took me some time to even find out because, the military actually disappeared my father's records completely. And, I come to find out later, trained as a sniper and had been, put into some pretty horrendous situations over there. And, the responsibility for that does not lie with the men on the ground who were doing what they thought was their job and, what they thought, was right in a lot of cases. It may not have been the right thing to do, but it doesn't mean that they were acting, thinking that they were doing the evil thing necessarily. I'm not saying that, and that's not to make a blanket statement for every single person that serves. There are very well people that end up in the services who are, just more than happy to get themselves a weapon so that they can, inflict pain upon the world. That's for sure. But the majority of them, in my opinion, are not these type of people, certainly. And I'm very glad that you noted that as well. And, I wish that, there had been some way to help my father actually. And I wish that there would be some way that we could begin to effect a change, among the guys who are doing it today as we speak. And, I think that in some ways, one of the most important things that we can do is resist the idea that conflict and combat are, necessary things, and the continual warfares that occur. I think that the people that speak out about it, regardless of what their agendas are, I believe that resistance to warfare is a worthy thing. And, without question, you cannot lay the blame for what the controllers do on the people on the ground. Because if you think about it very carefully, if you spent $1 today, if you participated in the financial system today in any way, shape, or form, you in one way or another actually have contributed to what the bankers do, and you've contributed to what the Federal Reserve does, and you've contributed to what these larger entities that don't have our best interests at heart in mind. Now, I'm not saying that everybody can unplug from the system overnight, but be aware that simply because you are someone acting on the ground to do things that you intend, I mean, when you're spending your money, you're not imagining that you're contributing to, say, slavery in another part of the world. You're not imagining that as you purchase certain goods, you are contributing to the starvation of other peoples. Necessarily, you are just there trying to feed your own family, furnish your own home, and take care of your own needs. But sometimes your contributions, if you're not well educated to understand what it is you're doing with your purchasing power, with your labor, and with your sentiments, even you are contributing in some way or other towards some very bad things sometimes. And it's not always what your intent was, but be aware you may be doing that just as well as that soldier who thought he was over there to defend freedom and to defend what he believed was the American way.
Our words are very, very powerful. Words change everything. You could be having a great day and then someone makes a comment and the rest of your day goes all the way to really, really wishing that you hadn't even woken up that day simply because something was said. Words change our perspective. We need to be conscious of the words that we choose and the way in which we speak. Sometimes we need to actually get on the phone and call people. Sometimes we actually have to get into the car and drive over there and say hello. We need each other. We're social creatures. All of this social media is great. We can meet people in other countries that we would have never met before. That's great. But we still need that physical interaction. We crave it. And it's not just enough if you video chat with someone. You have to actually, there's a release of dopamine that happens in your brain simply by having someone that you care about touch your shoulder that will change the chemical reactions that you have in your brain to think more positively. Hug somebody. I know that sounds really crazy and it sounds kind of kooky, but hugs release that dopamine. It alleviates the stress hormone, cortisol. And we are living like junkies on cortisol. So we need to just take a step back and stop and think about it. Get in touch with something that makes us feel really good and then make a decision. It will change your entire world. Trust me, it has no other way but to do so. But at least at that point, when you make that decision, it will be in the benefit of you or your family or your friends or the world. It won't be just because you're scared not to.
And, you know, I was discussing this last Saturday, actually, this very same topic. And, you know, it may sound silly to some people to say that the human interaction, the physical interaction between people is so very important. It literally is important from the cradle to the grave, literally, because, you know, babies that are not picked up, that are not touched, that are abandoned, regardless of their levels of food and everything else, die. They literally do die if they're not touched. This is why, sometimes, abandoned babies in hospitals, they take volunteers to allow them just to hold the children so that they will not, perish. And, you know, and even, people as they grow older, seniors, who are physically interacted with tend to live longer and tend to be healthier in general. But this does apply throughout your lifespan, that if you are a physically interactive person and you don't simply rely on the artificial world and the artificial constructs which have come up in this generation, more than any other, you know, you tend to have a healthier body and a healthier mind. And literally, you require that just as much as you require air and just as much as you require water and food. And the quality of said thing, whether it be the food, the water, the air, or the interaction with other people, truly does influence your overall health from day one to day last. So I think that's worth noting as well.
Absolutely. The reason why we feel like we have to fight back is because we're scared out of our minds. And every day that we go check our trusted source of news, we're scared out of our minds. But imagine if that trusted source of news was giving you that news based on integrity. We wouldn't have lies, we wouldn't have propaganda, we wouldn't have disinformation. We would be able to really trust the information that we have. And it is healthy to be skeptical. That's why you click on the source links. Read the source links. I've gone through source links and found that the quotation that they claimed was from the article that they were sourcing wasn't even in the article. They completely fabricated it, and it's almost like they picked something that some people pick headlines. They just read the headline and then use that as a source link. And you read the article and there's nothing to do with it, again, because headlines are not indicative of what's actually going on inside the article. It's just one aspect. So we really need to be careful, but we need to take this care. The problem is that we're lazy. Culturally, we are lazy. And it is facilitated with all of this technology because it's no longer that we're waiting for the microwaves. We have no ability to wait at all. And our children are completely impatient. And it's because we're impatient. They're just mirroring what we're doing. They're just doing it at a heightened level because they're children. So take a step back and look around and look at the chaos in your life and ask yourself why it's happening. And let's take some responsibility, folks, because everything that is in your life, you chose for it to be there. And you'll say, well, it's a negative thing, so I didn't choose that. It happened to me. No. You participated somewhere along the line to cause that negative thing to happen to you. So, the best part about knowing that is next time, you don't have to make that decision. You are now consciously aware. We're all flawed. So if we know what our strengths are, that's wonderful. Let's push forward. But let's also pay attention to our weaknesses and see where we are susceptible to being propagandized to believing disinformation, to reacting emotionally when we should be thinking about things logically. And let's just make a decision. Next time, we won't make that mistake. Next time, we won't excuse away comments that are egregious because somebody came up with a half-assed explanation after they made an egregious comment. If you know what I mean? It takes a minute to rewire our brains. It takes some action on our part. It takes some acknowledgement that we are responsible. But at that point, that is the freeing moment. It's not a moment where you sit there depressed and say, oh, my life sucks because I did all these bad things. No. That is a moment of free taking the chains off and standing up and saying, okay, well, I did do that. So next time something happens, I'm not going to make that same mistake. I'm going to do something different. If we're going to be different people, if we're going to, I'm saying that wrong. Let me start again. I pulled the George Bush.
It's okay. It's okay. Look, we're live and I stumble over stuff all the time. Do take your time and look, you made a mistake there. So now you can learn from that.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
If we're going to do something different, then we have to be someone that we've never been before. Because who we are got us to where we are now. Who we are right in this moment, right now, who you are got you to where you are in life. And that is the best that you can do. So if you want to get beyond where you are now, you have to become someone else. You have to change the way you think. You have to maybe even do the exact opposite of what you want to do. If your intention or your reaction is to run, stay still. If your reaction is to cry, laugh. If your reaction is to laugh, cry. Do everything opposite. Because that way you will find out who you have to be to get you to that next level. And like I said, don't be afraid of failure. Because every failure is a step toward success. And real success takes time. It's not overnight. If you want things, we always talk about how patient the New World Order is. Because they get this point that I'm giving you. They were taught this from a very early age. They understand that in order to get something done, it takes a little while. And I'm being facetious. It takes a long time. And in order to have a goal and stick with it, you have to be willing to accept failures along the way, but don't let that deter you from your goal. So guess what? If we want the New World Order to stop, then let's do what they're doing. Let's be patient about it. Let's change ourselves from the inside out. Let's pay it forward. Let's have an attitude of gratitude toward everything, and that will permeate forward. Trust me, it's an addiction that I think is worth having. Because it makes you feel so good when you give to someone and you know that you've helped someone. When they smile back at you and say thank you, that makes you feel so good. It really does. It's like tingly bubbles inside. Why wouldn't you want to replicate that feeling every single day? Replace it with the depression, replace it with the frustration, replace it with the anxiety. And then before you know it, you won't have to consciously replace it. You will be that type of person. You will be that person that you tell people that you are when you first meet them on a first date. And therefore you don't have to lie about it and your truth comes out 3 weeks later when they find out who you really are. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's something that happens a lot. And I'll tell you, it is dishonesty which does the most damage, it seems to me, when you're interacting with people. And if you ever notice, the most terrible things that seem to happen almost like dominoes falling usually begin with a misrepresentation or a misunderstanding because someone did not take the time to properly interact with someone. Almost everything begins on one of those two levels. I mean, and they spiral out of control all the time and become large-scale events. But almost always you can find like one person who just didn't act in an honest and good faith way, to someone else. And that's usually what begins to boil the pot. You know what I mean? So,
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, it just seems like but if, again, to take the positive, end of that, if everyone tries, within themselves, and no one's going to succeed all the time. I mean, sometimes, I have even found that I was taking a stand where I was not necessarily, taking the right stand because I had not honestly, looked at my position. I had not honestly looked at the other person's position. I had not honestly looked at, and really truly evaluated with critical thought, mind you, which is one of those dead arts as far as I'm concerned anymore. But, critical thought. I did not really truly evaluate the situation. I dug my feet into a place where I thought I was fine because I made assumptions and allowed myself to take shortcuts. And when that happens, a lot of bad things seem to come from a lack of education, a lack of understanding, and a lack of willingness to make the effort to put in what it is I want to take out of a situation. And I see that in hindsight, and then I try to the next time that a situation anywhere near similar comes up, I try and improve what it is that I did in the first place. I try and improve upon my actions the last time. Well, listen, that didn't work. So let's try this way this time, Instead of making the left turn, I make the right turn. Instead of getting loud about it, I do it the quiet way. I try the other approach or the other approaches, and you don't necessarily succeed the second time. It may be a combination of the two things, not an extreme. It could be various shades. But like you're saying, every failure should be seen as something else that can sort of be checked off the list of things not to do. So, yeah.
That's one step closer to knowing who you are. When my parents got divorced, I was 7. And my mother had to go to work full-time and school full-time. So I barely saw her for 7 years that it took her to get her full degree. And when I was getting married, I asked her about marriage and what her marriage was like before they got the divorce. And then I asked her, what was the most significant thing that happened to you emotionally from the divorce? And she said, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what colors I like. I didn't know how I wanted to decorate my house. I didn't know what pictures I wanted on the walls. And it's taken me years to figure out who I am, because before I was your mother, I was a wife. And before I was a wife, I was my father's daughter. And I went from my father's house to my husband's house. And now I'm on my own. And I didn't know who I was, and it took years to figure out who I was, what kind of music I like to listen to, what kind of books I like to read. Everything she did centered around being a mother and a wife. And when she was no longer a wife and she was just a mother, she had 2 little babies looking up at her saying, we can't allow you to fall apart. So she had to figure out who she was. And I take away from that it's very important that I figure out who I am. Not just as my children's mother and not just as my husband's wife, but who Suzanne is. And I guess that's what I like so much about being a journalist and coming on radio programs like yours and being able to speak, because this is who I really am. This is Suzanne Posel. This is not my husband's wife. This is not my children's mother. This is Suzanne. And I get to be me, and I get to express how I feel on the radio, and I get to talk about things in articles that I feel are important, that will help us affect change in our world, that we know this information so we can do better the next time. That's what I envision for myself, to be that person that helps other people do better, because I want to do better. I want to be the best Suzanne Posel I could possibly be, so that when I'm on my deathbed, I'm not thinking about all the things that I regret and all the situations that I felt like I couldn't control and all the emotional reactions I had that caused all these problems in my life, but rather someone that looks back and thinks about all the wonderful times I had with all these amazing people, whether they're in the room with me or not. I know that they love me. I'm secure in that. I know that I love myself. And that's 36 years in the making. I don't expect anyone who's listening to just all of a sudden look in the mirror and say, wow, I love you. But if we do that, as silly as that sounds, we say we love each other to other people. We say that we love our husband and our family and our friends. Tell yourself that too, because you need to hear it too. Because you're making decisions for yourself, and sometimes they don't work out right. Sometimes you get hurt. Sometimes you have to deal with addiction. Sometimes you have to deal with a problem that you have to overcome. You did that to yourself. So tell yourself that you love yourself and treat yourself the same way that you would treat your children and your husband and your wife and your family. You need that too.
Yeah, I once heard it said that, when I was just going through some books on psychology and I was studying some lectures on particular topics because I had gotten divorced from my first wife, and I was trying to sort of establish how it was I was going to continue fathering my children even though they weren't going to remain with me. I really looked at quite a few things, but one of the things that stuck with me that you just brought up to the top of my mind there is that, you want to take care of your family, and you must remember that you're part of it as well. So.
Absolutely. And I have a stepson, and I remember being the stepdaughter, and my stepmother did not want me around. When she met my father, she already had her kids, and they were already grown, and they were already out of the house. So then all of a sudden she gets hooked up with this guy who has a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, and she was not happy about that. And I remember that. And every time I'm around my stepson, I make it a point to make him know that he is loved and cared for, and he is wanted here in this house, that this is another family that he can be with. And even though I did not give birth to him and I don't really have any say in how he's raised, I care about his well-being, and I want him to be the best version of himself that he can be, the same way I treat my children. That's important, especially because he's my stepson, because he's in another home. And yes, his father is the father of my children, but this isn't his home. And when he's here, he needs to know that it's safe, that he can be himself, that he's loved and cared for just as much, not just by his father, but by everyone else around him. And that's important for us. But we can't allow ourselves to be isolated because we get depressed. And depression causes so many problems. It's not just psychological, it's physical. People who deal with clinical depression talk about how much it physically hurts to be depressed. If it physically hurts, that means you are interpreting your emotions in a physical way. Your body is physically reacting to your emotions. That's how strong your emotions are. That's how much of a hold your emotions have on you. So be careful how you feel. Pay attention to how you feel, because it could be hurting you in a way that you don't understand. It could be contributing to a disease that you come down with later on in life.
Right. I mean, I could make a joke here. Oh, I will. That's fine. You know what? As soon as I got divorced from my first wife, I'll tell you, I never had any of those stomach aches again. So I completely identify. And it wasn't just because she didn't know how to cook either. It was, believe me, it just all of a sudden went away. And I'm telling you, for about 5 years, people that were around me said, you're constantly complaining that your stomach is disturbed. You can't digest your food. You're not able to sleep, this and that and the third thing. And I'll tell you what, as much as it was not something I wanted, initially and everything else, as soon as it happened, all my stomach problems just seemed to vanish, and all of a sudden I could sleep.
Isn't that amazing?
Isn't that strange?
The thing that we hold on to is the thing that is destroying us. And when we let go and allow ourselves a possible other way, this is just one form of a government. This is just one form of an economic system. This is just one form of a society, of a culture. There are many, there's an infinite amount of ways we could have gone. So since we understand that this doesn't work, let's open our minds and say, scratch our heads. How can we improve upon this? We can't throw the baby out with the bathwater because this is what we have. But within the structure, we can return things back to the way that they were. And we can return things back to the way that we thought that they should be. And collectively, we can make a decision that if we don't participate in our own tyranny, and we don't participate in our fear, and we don't participate in our anxiety, and we do things that are going to be positive and push that energy back out into the people that we see physically in front of us. Like I said, it has no other ability but to radiate forward. That gratitude and that thankfulness that you show people that are just doing their job will radiate back out. I was told once, this was many, many years ago when I was in college, and I would always go to this one place to get coffee every morning before school. And I was always very nice to the cashier. And she came to me once and told me that she was having a really bad day. And because I sat down and talked with her for 5 minutes, she went back home and made a conscious decision to do something good for herself, which radically changed her entire life. And I won't get into what it was. But she did that simply because I gave her the belief that there are good people out there, simply because I took 5 minutes to talk to her after she handed me my coffee. You never know what your words and your interactions are causing with other people. And if you would assume anything, assume that that person needs you for some reason right now. And if you just show them even the smallest bit of kindness, you could reactivate some hope in their heart and change their life for them and help them be a better person. That's what we want. We don't want people to be racist. We don't want people to murder us. We don't want people to steal from us. We don't want people to lie and manipulate to us. So let's stop doing it to each other. It can stop with you. If it just stops in your small sphere, then that's fine. But if I'm assuming that I'm talking to 10,000 people, then if all 10,000 of you sit down and consciously decide that you're going to change your immediate sphere, how many cities, how many towns, how many families will be affected by listening to this broadcast? And that will have a permeation that radiates out forward every single day, every time that you choose to be kind and pay it forward.
Right, and even that singular act, like you were saying, I mean, the pebble in the pond does work, because what happens is, simply because let's just say in your entire life, let's just say for a moment, you only influence the thinking of one person, just one, and you turn things around for them where they had been completely negative. They had seen things as quite hopeless, and you had restored some level of positive thinking, some level of positive action, and you had given them a reason to look into something that was positive. You don't know necessarily that one person might not spark an entire movement, which could spark 100 movements, which could spark 1,000,000 movements and actually change the whole thing. So I think that's always valid. And of course I hope to change more than one person's mind through my actions, but either way, if I do change one person's mind, you have no idea sometimes if it's just that particular right person at the right time. And you have no idea necessarily what that might cause later on in life even. I mean, let's just say that one person doesn't make that monumental change, but they have a child. And because they had a different way of doing things, that child grows up to create a different kind of way of being. And who knows, that might actually be beneficial to your progeny. That might be beneficial to your descendants. And that is something that I think is definitely what I have to keep in mind when I get these sort of, why are you bothering with this? You're not going to change people's minds. You're not going to change the system. You're not going to be able to extract yourself from it. Well, maybe I won't. But if I don't make the effort, one thing is for certain, and that is that if I've made no effort, then I shall make no gain. So this is why I certainly do this. And I think you're telling us that this is why you do what you do.
It is exactly why I do what I do. I want people to know the truth. I want them to understand the connections between the corporations that are making these decisions and why they're doing what they're doing, how it all fits. I want you to feel empowered to go down to your city council meeting and talk to these people and get Agenda 21 out of your city and town. And the only way we can do that is if we get up and start showing up at these places and participating. Our constitutional republic is not a spectator sport. And democracy always ends in police state and mob rule. And I think that I just described where we're living right now. So since we bought the lie that we live in a democracy, let's go back and see what we were intended to be and understand what a constitutional republic is. Understand what the framers meant when they were talking about sovereignty and start acting like that. If we accept abuse on any level, we will continue to be abused. We cannot have the victim mentality. The victim is afraid. The victim has that fight or flight always in their mind. The victim is stressed out and scared because they are waiting for the next time that they will be victimized. We are not victims. We are people who made bad decisions and allowed bad things to happen. Okay, that's fine. That's great. Because now we know what our problem is. And we can fix it. And it starts with us. It doesn't start with them. It starts here inside you. And that starts when you stop making decisions based on emotional reactions. It's amazing the kind of day you will have when you stop reacting and start acting. And it's going to take a minute to rewire your brain. And everyone around you is going to act like you're some sort of alien. And you may get some resistance from people because they are used to the person that you used to be. And they might not be convinced in their own mind that the new person that you're trying to be would work out for them. It might be a little scary for the people that are closest to you. You can reassure them, we're not getting a divorce. I'm not going to leave my family. I'm not going to leave my job. I just changed my perspective. I'm not a slave. Slaves are scared. And when slaves are scared, they make bad decisions. And violence is not an acceptable form of communication. Ever. Never, never, never. So let's stop being slaves and start acting like sovereigns. How would sovereign people behave? How would individuals who are affecting change for themselves, the benefit of their family, and the benefit of their community behave? And once you define that, start moving toward being that. The slave mentality is not just that you go to a 9-to-5 job or that you're in the system or that you're using cash or that you're eating GMO. The excuses, the mentality that allows for the excuses to keep living the miserable life that you're living is the slave mentality. It's not the actions. The actions are a symptom of the problem. The problem is in your mind. You have been fooled into thinking that you are not worth anything, that you are not special, that you could never accomplish anything, and that if you just go along, find a job, get married, have a couple kids, and live your life the way everyone expects you to, everything will be fine. And we all know that that's not true. So, let's do something different. Because if we're going to have something different, we have to be different. And I want all of you to do different because I can't do this on my own. And I know there are a lot of great people like you, Charles, and many others. We're all waiting for everyone to realize that we need to do this together. This is an everybody thing. So if we don't give in to the fear of the manufactured revolutions, and we recognize that there are actual legitimate grievances, there are bad things, bad people in control are doing bad things to us, yes. But if we start looking at the actual problems, and fixing them, the other problems will go away. And the conjecture and the assumption will all just take care of itself. And we can leave the fiction to the fiction. And we can deal with actual reality. And we can have a better world. We didn't get here accidentally. We got here on purpose. We weren't paying attention. We were reacting emotionally.
This is absolutely true, and this is, and it didn't begin with us necessarily. but it can begin to end with us, all of us who are here now. So,
yeah, like Bill Hicks said, the people who come back and tell us about how wonderful life is, we kill those people.
mm-hmm.
We always do. We don't want anyone to know that starting right now, literally right this second, you can make a decision that you're not going to be scared anymore and that you're going to do things that benefit yourself. And everything that comes into your path, you're going to make a decision based on how it's going to benefit you and your family and your community. How can you go wrong? How could your family go wrong? How could your community go wrong if that's where you're coming from? But if you're scared out of your mind and you're buying, prep stuff and you're just absolutely freaked out waiting for the other shoe to drop, it will. It will, because we're all sitting there waiting for it. And it has no other way but to happen. But that's not what we want. Nobody wants a revolution in this country because many, many people are going to die. 1/3 of the population in the United States died during the Civil War.
Mm.
We don't want that.
No, I think that if you bring it, you break it down to a completely personal level and you just, if you just sort of feel how it is, if you can, let me see if I can rephrase that. If you can embrace the idea of empathy, for your fellow being, and you can, distance yourself from apathy and aggression, there can be nothing negative that really comes from that, I think. So long as you're making educated decisions and realistically, trying to move in a positive direction for yourself and thusly influencing those closest to you and allowing that to permeate outwards. I think that if there is enough of us doing that, the entirety of all of these very ugly sort of systems that have been meticulously placed over this entire planet could all be taken down without the need for senseless bloodshed, I think. And that's about where that goes.
Yeah, we have to think about this. We're at a precipice right now. And there are factions who want this revolution. They've manufactured them all over the world. And it works. It works because everybody wants to be free. And everybody thinks that they're not. So if you tell someone that they're not something, but they could be if they do these 3 things or these 4 things or whatever, they will do them because they want that outcome. But what happens in all of these countries? They end up in stability operations, patsies, and owing their resources to the IMF and the World Bank. Do we want that here in the United States? No, we don't. We want to be free. We have the structure here. I thought it was very, very telling when last week Justice Scalia was talking to law students in Tennessee and told them that if income taxes rise any higher, they should just revolt. Everyone should just revolt. We've got the means by which to do it. We've got the internet. We've got everything we need. Just start a revolution here in the United States just because of the taxes. Why are they saying that? This man was appointed by Reagan. You know who's in charge of the, and I'm not playing into the left-right paradigm, I'm just pointing out a little interesting fact. The International Republican Institute are behind all of these manufactured revolutions. Senator John McCain sits on the board of directors. He's also one of the co-authors of the NDAA. Right.
And, I hate to even address McCain as an entity, but, the fact is that this is a guy who should know better if his past is as it appears to be, if his biography has evolved as it appears to have evolved. This is definitely a man who should know better about the nature of warfare and the nature of the ugly sort of things that can occur when unjust aggression is unleashed upon entire civilizations. You know, this is a guy who should know better. And
he should. He was a POW, right?
Right.
He should know better.
Yeah, that's for sure. You know, believe it or not, we're almost out of time.
Wow.
So, and I know I'm sure that there's some people that listen to all this and probably, oh, there goes, Chuck again with this whole unified theory of peace and love. And let me tell you, I was not some sort of hippie kid overnight or anything. This was not something I came to right away. I believed in the ideas of aggression and everything else until I started to educate myself and understand that the end result of all of that is never good. There is never good that comes from violence. It just doesn't. You can say that over time, you say that, well, because this revolution was successful and caused this to happen or that to happen. Well, it really does depend on your perspective, doesn't it? Each one of these things that occurs where you have these mass movements that end up in violent conflict, quite honestly, there's still a whole lot of bloodshed there. And I guarantee you can always find collateral damage. You can always find innocent victims, and you can always find somebody who winds up getting oppressed afterwards. There's always, when the new power structure comes into being, there's almost always historically some particular group of people that ends up getting left out. And I think sadly, because we weren't paying attention all of this time, the reality is that almost all of us have been left out now, on one level or another, or on many levels. And I do believe that that's one of those things you can't really dispute. And that's why philosophically I think that violent action is not the answer. And I don't mean that you should never defend yourself or that you should allow anyone to abuse you necessarily. But the idea that answering violence with violence will do anything but create more violence, to me, seems illogical. There's no way that it's going to do anything else but that. But like I said, we are starting to wrap up, so do you want to give us a couple of places? I mean, you mentioned Occupy Corporatism and the newspaper.
The USindependent.com.
USindependent.com. I always forget websites because, my little Google engine or whatever I decide to use reminds me of everything I've already looked at. So, but besides that, that's a little, refrain from earlier in the program. But even so, you have those two sites. I know that you participate in a lot of groups on Facebook, and I see your name everywhere. I know you've been a guest on other radio shows. Or any other places that we can find your work?
Not at the moment. I did have a radio show, but I put it on hold. We're putting together an actual broadcast television show, so I had to take my radio show offline, but it will come back as an actual television show. We're working out the details right now. And I'm taking some time to write a book. So I might be a little bit scarce, but I'm always showing up on radio shows, and I'm always happy to come back on your show. And so that's where you can find me, anywhere.
Oh, excellent. Well, what is, you want to give us a little hint about what the book's going to be about?
No, because I hadn't mentioned it before just now. So.
Oh, okay. No problem. I just figured, let's see what we can learn, but that's cool though. But in the meantime, like I said, Occupy Corporatism. And, even if you're just, part of the Facebook thing, and I know, we can talk about how it's a, complete control mechanism in and of itself. But the thing is that, if you take a tool like that, everything is double-edged, but if you take a tool like that and you utilize it just the right way, you might find some interesting stuff. And I'm telling you, this lady is in my news feeds all the time. So if you have any sort of, kinship with any of my views, you might find her stuff at least thought-provoking, if nothing else. But I found it interesting. And like I said, I was sourcing some of her articles for directing my own research into various subjects. They were sort of my jumping off points in a few cases. I don't even remember the specifics because at this point you're just sort of melded into my, melded into my little media spectrum at this point. So, but I really want to thank you for coming on tonight. And I didn't expect that we were going to wind up talking 2 hours, but we did. You know, is there anything that you didn't think you got to get to here before my awfully obnoxious bumper kicks in and drowns us out?
No, it was a wonderful conversation. There it goes.
There it goes. All right, Suzanne, thanks again. And everybody stay tuned. UCY Radio. At the age of 19 in 1962, she was
See, but I have the files. You know, I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? You know, crystals and the fondle slab of choice, I don't know when computers, the internet, professional wrestlers, and not just even tourist style. It doesn't matter where the cartoon comes from as long as it's real. It doesn't, it's hard to get real information. Because seriously,